This is a podcast from Minute Media.
Hello and welcome to the Over and Back Classic NBA podcast. I am Jason, and with me as usual is Rich. Hello, Rich.
Hey, what's going on?
Not a whole lot. We take a little break after episode 300. Been watching these NBA playoffs, enjoying life, doing our thing, but it's time to get cracking on another podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was an unintentional delay where we didn't quite realize that we had been gone so long. We're like, oh, crap, we better do a show sometime soon. So, we're here. We're back. Yeah, there you go.
Right.
So, yeah, it is not over. 300 was not the last episode ever.
No, not.
301 could be. Who knows?
Who knows?
You never know what's going to happen. But
the
for
future's
now,
not promised.
Yeah. But for now, 301, and we'll continue to move on as we. 400? We can get to 400, right?
We probably can get to 400.
500. I'm not promising 500.
All right,
that might be hard.
Fair. That's fair.
We'll see what happens. Who knows? Yeah, it's great.
We're getting old, so it's tough. Yeah. So, speaking of the future not being promised, we have a excellent show today. Teams that added a big star but severely underperformed. Found a lot of interesting stories here. Two examples this year. One being the Nets. They were swept in the first round after they gained and lost James Harden, kind of were expected to get Ben Simmons to replace him, but that never really happened, at least not this year. And then also the Lakers winning only 33 games after adding Russell Westbrook. I think both teams coming into the season, there was at least somewhat expectations, if not a championship, certainly deep playoff run. I mean, the Lakers, there are probably some warning signs with Westbrook, but I don't think anyone thought they were going to win 33 games. Like, I think they at least were going to be like a solid playoff team. So
yeah. I remember discussing the Lakers in the offseason with my buddies, and I had a few bets, actually. My friends were like, oh, I think they're going to win the championship. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to bet that they're not going to win the championship. And that was our bet, though. It's just like the championship or not like I think they're really going to win. I mean, nobody was like, I wonder if this team's going to struggle to even be 500. It was like nobody. Right. I mean, you thought, okay, is this a championship core? Maybe not, but it still has LeBron. It still has Anthony Davis. And, maybe you get something out of it. Yeah, I don't think anybody expected 33 games for the Lakers. So, yeah, I did cash in on those championship or no championship bets from my friends. But, yeah, they paid me in, like, with 2 months left in the season was an unforeseen result of what the whole season was.
Sure. Absolutely. Yes. So we're talking about a handful of teams here. We are not going to count the 2004 Lakers. Hey, they were the number 2 seed. They made the finals. Right.
Really I see them. Yeah. I see them a lot in these lists, and that team was like very close to winning a championship. Yes, they all wanted to punch each other, but like that's happened before too. Title teams have done that. Like, was that team long for the world? No, but they very, very likely could have if they just decided that they didn't want to like really, really punch each other in the finals. Like, they probably could have won. Or if Malone doesn't get hurt, there's a good chance. Not taking anything away from that Pistons team, that was great, but they don't belong in this list at all. They don't belong in any list of like disappointing teams because they were really, really good and they almost won the title. So they just all hated each other and wanted to kill each other.
So I think we have we're trying to get true disappointments here.
Yes.
Like, the hype was high. There was expected to, be a championship team or at least, be up there, and they really severely underperformed. So hopefully, listeners, hey, you agree, you don't agree, let us know. We always enjoy. We maybe missed team. Maybe we're stretching here. There's one team here, which honestly I think is a little bit of a stretch, but I think it's an interesting story, and that's what we're all about. So should be a good time.
Is that what we do? Interesting stories? Yeah. All right.
I believe so. Yes.
I guess we try that. Yeah, we try.
Right. I mean,
no, I'm just kidding.
Sometimes we tell boring stories, but hopefully in an interesting way.
But you learn. Yeah, you learn from the boring stories. Hopefully.
You learn. Sometimes you do. Yes. Boredom can be a great motivator. So we're going to start off with, why not start off 1971 Atlanta Hawks. My Atlanta Hawks, wonderful. This is their third year in Atlanta. They've been a solid team for the last couple of years. They made 2 straight division finals. This is before conferences. So basically they were one step away from the NBA finals. They had Lou Hudson, excellent scorer. They had Bill Bridges, great rebounder. They had Walt Bellamy's, one of the better centers of his league of his time. Walt Hazard was a good guard. They were a really solid team. Kept bumping into the Lakers in the division finals, but hey, they were really good. Then they add Pete Maravich, one of the most hyped college stars ever, averaged 44 points per game in his career at LSU. a flashy play, awesome highlight reel passes, a guy who's absolutely, is he a great player? It's questionable. Is he a star? Absolutely. He is a star, gets a lot of people really excited, especially white people, and that's
Great White Hope. Yeah. The one,
Great
one of
White
the first
Hope.
Great White Hopes of, it's not, the league hasn't been, quote unquote, black for a lot of years, but they were still oh my God, okay, we've had Russell, we've had Will, we've had all these, okay, we need to get another guy, we need to get another, and Maravich was that guy. I mean, I think not even with like hushed tones, like straight up like considered, oh, thank God we finally have a white superstar again in the league. So yeah, it was definitely that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yes. And the Hawks were very much, their dominant players were all African-American players. So yeah, they were very much a black team. And there was, as we'll get into, there was a lot of focus on that during the time that they were there. So yeah, they've got Coach Richie Guerin, they've got pretty much, they bring everybody back from the prior year, adding Maravich. Their only major loss was two-time All-Star Joe Caldwell, who went to the ABA. He wasn't like a huge star, but he was definitely a good player and important to the team. And, and they ended up missing him quite a bit, it turns out. So, but you think, adding a budding superstar to a team with a bunch of really good players, but no real stars seems like a decent bet. That's worked in the past and would work in the NBA in the future. But for this team, not so much.
No,
they go from 48 wins to 36 wins. They do make the playoffs, but only in really screwy circumstances, which we'll get into. But they made each other miserable, though. They were kind of doing that even before Pistol joined the squad. So they were a bit of a cantankerous bunch. So that part of it, I mean, definitely that dynamic added to it, but they already were a little bit like that. They made the playoffs. This was the first year of conferences. Before there were two divisions. Now there were two conferences with four divisions, and each division, you had two teams that were going to make it the top two teams in each division. So the Hawks make it, they win 36 games. The Celtics, who finished third in their division, don't make it. They win 44 games. So that's obviously pretty screwy. The West is even worse.
I was going to say the West is even more galling. That the Phoenix Suns win 48 games and don't make it, but the 41 San Francisco Warriors do make it. So brutal stuff.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
The Pistons are 45 wins in the Midwest. The entire Midwest division has more than 45 wins, but they can only have two representatives, and they have the Bucks, who are very, very good. They have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and the Bulls, who have a very good year at 51 and 31. And the Suns at 48 wins out of the playoffs. The Pistons at 45 wins out of the playoffs. And yet you have the 36-win Atlanta Hawks over here in the East, and the 41-win Pacific Division representative San Francisco Warriors making it. So rough playoff format here. I get what they were going for, but you could pretty much see from day one, oh crap, this isn't going to work. But
they ended up. I think that they had 2 or 3 years of this format before they went to a more normal playoff format. So of at least the top team had to make it, but they would choose the, otherwise it would just be they didn't end up screwing teams over that much after. This was by far the worst year of that.
Right. This is when they really tried to make these divisions matter. And we see that now. I mean, they don't matter at all. They pretty much, especially in today's NBA, matter almost none whatsoever. Divisions, other than, who you play a little bit. But even that, I wonder if in the next few years, we're going to see that kind of melt away a bit, because MLB is doing that. I think next year they're starting where everyone's doing balanced schedule. So it literally does not matter where you play, what division you play in, anything like that. And I do wonder if the NBA it gets kind of close to that pretty soon as well. But this year they really wanted to make divisions matter. A couple years later, they're going to make conferences matter more. And then everyone's kind of wondering when eventually they might just let all of that go. But I don't know. We've had shows about that kind of playoff changes and playoff format changes and whatnot. But I don't know. I enjoy the conferences at least a little bit, but I do not enjoy divisions because who cares?
Right, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
The Midwest, the Western. I do always love the Western Conference Midwest Division though, which is Detroit. When I think Western America, I think of Detroit, Michigan.
Well, I guess the Bucks and the Bulls and the Pistons kind of fit together in a division. The Suns definitely not.
Yeah, that's a rough travel. It didn't affect the Pistons; they were still pretty good. But rough travel to have to go to Phoenix as often as they had to go to Phoenix. But when you have a team in Cincinnati and a team in Buffalo and a team in Baltimore, you're gonna have to. That's a lot of East Coast. So
and hey, the Baltimore and Atlanta were stuck in the West for quite a while. But
right.
So
Atlanta.
Everybody got screwed over by that. So yes. So expectations for the Hawks, they are definitely they're high, but hey, things kind of go sour quickly. An excellent article from the time from Sport Magazine, which is brought to us from waydowntown.com. Basically, kind of just talking about the teams like, hey, the thought is, Maravich, if he can make the adjustment to the pros quickly, they absolutely, this team could be a dynasty. I mean, they're so, well balanced. They got, Lou Hudson's one of the best shooters. They Walt Bellamy and Bill Bridges, excellent rebounders, and Walt Hazard and Joe Caldwell, just great playmakers before, Caldwell absolutely leaves. Advanced season ticket sales double, so there's excitement. They're fairly new to Atlanta, and Atlanta's a growing, thriving state. It's like, pro basketball can take its place in Atlanta. Opening games scheduled for network television, but training camp happens, things get a little weird. Bill Bridges, was fired as team captain and reinstated only hours later. Joe Caldwell has a holdout eventually, and he wants more money. He eventually goes to the ABA, just like Zemo Beatty had the previous year, one of their best centers. So the Hawks have a history of not paying their guys very much, except for Maravich, of course. Lou Hudson has an injury. Hazard just, kind of struggles there a little bit. Obviously Maravich is playing his position. Maybe there's a little bit of nerves for there. And 2 months into the season, the Hawks had the fourth worst record in the league. Only the three expansion teams had worst records. So, they struggle. Definitely, there's some bitterness among the team at the attention that Maravich gets. It's kind of a mix because, I think they all sort of understand the situation. They resent it a little bit. Some of them resent him a little bit. The Hawks president, Bob Cousins, says like, oh, maybe we overdid the advanced billing of Maravich. Maybe if I'd had more experience in basketball, we could avoid some of the problems that we've had. There's a Sports Illustrated article toward the end of that season. They do end up sort of rallying. They do make the playoffs, as we mentioned, 36 wins. Their record is at least not fourth worst in the league at that point. But everyone says this is a really grueling season. It's really hard. Everyone says it's pretty bad. Walt Hazard says, hey, when things are going bad, the whole air is bad. It becomes even hard to live together. Maravich does things that's outlined here, and also there's a great book on I've called Pistol on Maravich that I recommend everybody read.
Really good stuff.
And Maravich does stuff like picks up the check for his teammates. It's like, I'm making so much more money. I need to pick up the check for my teammates. But then some of his teammates kind of resent that. It's like, he's like, is he trying to show us up, or is he trying to
he's 23 years old here. You know what I mean? So it's like, you got this 23-year-old superstar that's making more money than all these veterans. That's tough. It's tough to live with that. It's there's a psychological thing that, sometimes it works. Sometimes if you have the right guy and the right star and the right team and all that sort of stuff, it works. But in this case, like you said, it was already kind of a cantankerous bunch, and now they're all scrapping together, whatever money they can make in the NBA as professional basketball players, and then this white superstar comes in. He's getting all the hype, he's getting all the money, and it wasn't the right crew. He probably wasn't the right guy, and it just I totally see how him coming in and saying, don't worry guys, I'll pick up the bill, is like, all right dude, get out of it. It's tough. There's a psychological thing for sure there that you could totally see from the standpoint of, hell, if it happened in your job, you might do the same thing. If some hotshot 22-year-old executive comes in and is like, hey, I'm buying lunch for everybody, you're like, screw this guy. It's kind of I totally get it.
Right. And as we know now, Maravich was like an extremely weird combination of psychologically tormented, but also extremely pampered and catered to.
Yes.
Right. So that was a real psychological thing. And there's just the natural adjusting to the NBA as a lead guard, and how there's some guys made that adjustment right away. Obviously Oscar Robertson was awesome right away, but even somebody like Jerry West or Walt Frazier, who became among the best players in the game. They early in the career took them a couple years or so to really figure out and actually be a star player. So and then there's a great Dick Motta quote describing Pete Maravich's defense is bearing considerable resemblance to the Lend-Lease program. So it's because you don't get enough Lend-Lease.
A very 70s joke
references.
Right there. I love
it. Right. Yes,
that is the most Dick Motta 1971 quote ever. I love it.
Exactly. So
the Lend-Lease program.
The Lend-Lease program. Hey, you bring a 40s reference into a to a 70s joke. It's a good time. But that's the dad joke of the time. That's like me trying to make jokes to my daughter about like 80s music. Right. Yeah. It's like
Lend-Lease program.
Yeah, Lend-Lease program. Anyway, so so I mean, and definitely he had a tough time with the expectations. He's dubbed the Miracle Man, as we said. He struggled early, and then like suddenly he's getting booed by the team. He's gets a lot of pressure. The news media, the fans, everything. He says, well, because when somebody signs a step of contract, you're automatically going to have resentment because it's part of human nature. It's something you have to adjust to. There's nothing you can really do about it. You try to earn respect and maybe have them accept you as what you are. But definitely felt that pressure immediately right away and struggled with it to an extent. Yeah, I mean, now, to give it a little bit of context, like he was still statistically he's one of the better guards in the league still. He he certainly wasn't like a bad player by any stretch, but and there's always kind of been, but he averaged 23 points per game that season. I think he was second in Rookie of the Year, but I don't think he won Rookie of the Year, but he was second in Rookie of the Year. But I mean, he still was statistically performed well in a lot of ways. Made the all-rookie team, obviously. So it wasn't like he was a complete disaster, but, in terms of like matching the hype, it was going to be extremely difficult to do that. End of the season, they ended up losing to the defending champion Knicks in the first round, 4-1. Maravich had 22 points per game, although only 4-12 true shooting, which was bad even then. 5.2 rebounds, 4.8 assists. Interesting enough, but it just kind of shows you the difference in the league from now to then. The Hawks literally play they play 7 guys, but Jerry Chambers, their 7th guy, plays 22 minutes in 4 games during the series. So really, they play 6 guys in this series. And now the Knicks play 10 guys, but they really, it just how heavily they relied on like their top 5 or 6 guys at this point. And there's still. Most teams now, have an 8-man rotation, but the minutes certainly are balanced more than now than they are then. It's interesting to look at.
Oh yeah, it's totally. Well, what you're trying to say is today's players are weak, and
I am. And they are weak. They're weak.
They're pampered.
Cowards.
They're babies. Millennials.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah,
the Lend-Lease program for all of them. You know what I mean? They all just want freebies. They all want handouts.
They all just want the Lend-Lease program. Absolutely, that's all the kids care about.
You've been trying to do. So you're trying to tell your daughter, don't become one of those, Lend-Lease program people.
Right. Yes.
She's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Earn your lease. Yeah.
Yes, right.
Don't expect it to be lended to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's like, what? Go away. I guess I will go away. Yes. Speaking of going away, I guess the 1999 Houston Rockets.
Oh, yeah. They went away.
So they went away very quickly. For the purposes of this, and what's unfortunate is this team sometimes does get lumped into like this whole Rockets era. The 1997 Rockets were good as hell. They added Charles Barkley. They already had Clyde Drexler and Hakeem Olajuwon. That team was solid, though. They won 57 games. They made it to the Western Conference Finals. They were a John Stockton, miracle 3 away from maybe making the NBA Finals. We're not counting them. We're not. That team is really, really good. They did not disappoint. They were fine. The 1989 Rockets, they disappointed. They added Scottie Pippen.
Yeah.
And this deal was not finalized until January due to the NBA lockout. But was a huge move for both the Bulls and the Rockets. It first for the Bulls signified that this competitive window was officially done. And everybody knew that it was done. But yeah, after Michael Jordan and Phil Jackson are done and Michael Jordan retires for the second time, Phil Jackson retires for the first of many times, this was the final nail in the coffin, that this thing is done. This thing is over. Much had been made about Pippen and his contract with the Bulls, and it was a big part of the Last Dance documentary and stuff, and how he was, woefully underpaid for many years. And regardless of your thoughts on that and whatnot, Chicago and GM Jerry Krause, I think, did a pretty solid thing for Pippen at the end of here, doing a sign and trade as opposed to simply letting Pippen leave for free agency, because by doing the sign and trade, they were able to give him a much bigger deal, 5 years, $67.2 million, with $15 million in incentives as well, thanks to bird rights and some other wrinkles in signing your own players. Now, how much credit do we want to give them for saying, hey, we'll pay you, but by pay you, I mean another team will pay you. We'll just do that. Like, I guess they could have just said, fuck you, go away. But at least they made it so the Houston Rockets had to pay him more money. So for whatever you want to give credit to, at least they did that, and at least Pippen was able to make a little bit more money. And the Bulls, in exchange, got quite literally nothing. They got Roy Rogers and a second-round pick. So they pretty much said, we're good. We just take this guy. We just want to be really, really bad. And it worked out very well. They were really, really bad for a lot of years. Pippen would say, I would like to thank the Chicago Bulls, the great people of the city of Chicago, and all of my teammates for 11 wonderful seasons. I'd also like to personally thank the Bulls for helping me through this period of free agency. I wish them the best because that is what Chicago deserves. So there you go. So anyway, to bring Pippen into the fold here, the Rockets asked Charles Barkley, a free agent at that time, hey, we still want to bring you, we still want to keep you, but would you mind taking a little bit of a pay cut? So Charles Barkley has talked about this on numerous shows and numerous things, including Bill Simmons' Any Given Wednesday show. He says, quote, the only year that I was fat, I don't know the context of like what question was asked, but probably like, hey, what do you make of people saying that you got fat? Because Pippen would always say, oh, his fat butt. He would always refer to Barkley as fat butt or whatever. Yeah. This didn't go well, in case you're wondering.
No,
Spoiler, it doesn't go well. Considering one of the players calls the other guy fat butt all the time. But so he says, the only year that I was fat was my last year in Houston because they had promised me $12 million. When I showed up, the contract was only for $8 million. And I said, what happened to my other $4 million? And they said, well, we've just decided to keep it. So what happened here is that Barkley and the Rockets had agreed to a $12 million deal, but that was before the lockout, so they couldn't really do anything. Well, the Rockets said that they were kind of spooked, and I think all teams were kind of spooked by the recent Minnesota Timberwolves, Joe Smith, kerfuffle, whatever you want to bring, so they didn't want to put anything in writing yet, especially not during the lockout, especially not under the table deals, anything like that. So there was nothing in writing. It was just kind of a verbal, hey, yeah, we'll give you $12 million. Okay, when the lockout's over, we'll get back and we'll put pen to paper there. So when the lockout's over and Barkley goes, okay, I'd like my $12 million, they then said, well, now we have Scottie Pippen, so would you mind taking less? Barkley eventually says, sure, I guess. It's going to get us Scottie Pippen. We're hopefully going to win a championship. It's one of my final few years in the league. That's fine. So there were some issues getting the contract all the way ironed out for Scottie Pippen, but finally, on January 23rd, 1999, it is official. Scottie Pippen says, I'll have no problem putting on this jersey. I'm very comfortable with it. In fact, I'm going to sleep in it tonight. So those jerseys suck, so I hope he didn't sleep in them.
Right. Had he ever seen those jerseys? I mean, I would have...
I would be caught dead sleeping or living in those stink-ass jerseys. So,
right, yeah.
God. But anyway, this new Rockets team seemed doomed pretty much from the start. So Barkley not getting the money he thought he deserved because they bring in Scottie Pippen. Plus, it was going to be a weird season no matter what. The lockout had caused a very unique and different than usual schedule for the NBA. One that in aging and, what's the best terminology here for Charles Barkley at this time? Portly fella, Charles. Yeah. He was certainly
husky. Yes.
He wasn't 1993 Phoenix Suns Charles, but when you think it's always hilarious when you go back and watch like 80s Barkley and that was his nickname was like the round mound of rebound or whatever, and you're like, that guy's in like tremendous shape. Like, sure, he ain't, not great, but look at him, he's still like, and then you see like this Barkley, you're like, oh, I get it for this Barkley.
He was,
especially post lockout where Barkley was not the only player that pretty much assumed the lockout was never going to end, and then they said, oh, it's ending and we're playing in a couple weeks, and they went, ooh. Oops, so about that, I have been eating and not playing basketball, so I'm a little, so he was not great. He says, quote, I can't play 3 games in 3 nights. I can tell you that right now. I don't want to have sex 3 nights in a row. I definitely don't want to play 3 games in 3 nights. So there you go. Hey, the money's back again because Charles Barkley also said, I was laying on the trainer's table and Matt Bullard came in and he kicked me off of it. He says that he makes more money than I do, so he has first dibs on the table. What kind of league is this when Matt Bullard makes more money than I do?
That's not a bad question.
I mean, he's not wrong, but that tells you where we're at with this season, just in case you're wondering where things are going. This is his teammates that he's talking about here. So other changes to the team as well. Clyde Drexler smartly is like, deuces, I'm out. This isn't going to work out very well, so I'm leaving. Antoine Carr, the Utah Jazz NBA Finals legend, is signed and brought in. But otherwise, things stayed pretty consistent from the team that disappointed last year, going 41-41. They lost in the first round, but things were changing. They were bringing in Scottie Pippen, one of the great players in the NBA, second, guy, had led to the Bulls or was a big part of the Bulls winning, 6 titles in 8 years or whatever. So yeah, he's back. He's here. Drexler's gone, but Hakeem is still there. Barkley's still there. Everything is still going to work. They start pretty well. They're 6-2. They lose 5 of their next 6 games, and they sputter into the end of the first month at 8-6. They get a hot month of March, including a 9-game win streak. Hey, things are okay. And they go into April 22-9. They end the season at 31-19, third in the competitive NBA Midwest Division. The team finishes 14 in SRS. 5th in offensive rating, unfortunately 15th in defensive rating, not that great. And Charles Barkley, despite it all, plays really, really well. He averages 16.1 points per game, 12.3 rebounds per game in 42 games. He becomes the second player in NBA history after Wilt Chamberlain to accumulate 23,000 points, 12,000 rebounds, and 4,000 assists in his career. Another Wilt stat there, of course. There's always a Wilt stat.
Yeah. Wilt stat, yeah.
Hakeem Olajuwon, another really good season for him. I mean, there's always this idea that he had started to get really old. That was coming in like the Toronto years, but he was still really good here. He plays in all 50 games. He averages 18.9 points per game and 9.6 rebounds per game. And they also get some great contributions from young players like Michael Dickerson, who has 10.9 points per game. I completely forgot about this, that Cuttino Mobley was on this team at this time, 9.9 points per game. Othello Harrington, 9.8 points per game. And Michael Dickerson, a renaissance man, shoots 43% from 3 and takes a lot of threes. He's like, I'm going to take these threes and I'm going to make them. And they're like, okay.
All right, sure.
Is that going to work, though? So what's going to happen, though? He's like, well, I'm going to shoot it from this line, and that's going to be worth more than 2, and I'm going to make them more often than not. And they're like, okay. I mean, all right. if you want to try it, you can try it. But
sure.
What about Scottie, though? I have not mentioned Scottie Pippen in all those names that I mentioned. Well, that's because he plays in all 50 games. That's good. And that surprises a lot of people because he had battled some major back injuries during his last year with the Bulls. He played in only 44 games and pretty much, was a non-factor during some of the NBA Finals games. But despite all that, Pippen averages 19.9 points per game, or 19.1 points per game in 1998. Last season with the Bulls, 6.6 win shares. In 1999, though, something just happened. He scores only 14.5 points per game, his lowest since his sophomore year back in 1989. Pippen went from shooting 44.7% from the field in his finals Bull season to a career-low 43.2% as a Rocket. He did increase his rebounding total, and overall it wasn't a bad season, but he was definitely not the superstar that Houston thought they were getting. He still made the NBA All-Defensive First Team. That was his 8th time doing that. So anyway, the stage is set. Rockets versus Lakers, first round of the playoffs. Lakers, a very emerging team with Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant. They were going through some of their own turmoil as well, as Del Harris is fired and Kurt Rambis takes over for a little bit. We're not quite in the Phil Jackson era yet. That is coming very, very soon. But it's Rockets-Lakers. Barkley plays great in these playoffs. He averages 23.5 points per game, 52.9% shooting, and 13.8 rebounds per game. This is going to unfortunately be his final postseason. Olajuwon does struggle a little bit. He has trouble guarding and scoring on peak Shaq. 13.3 points per game, 7.3 rebounds per game. Pippen, he plays well, though. Definitely better than his regular season. He has 18.3 points per game, 11.8 rebounds per game, and 5.5 assists per game. So that's really good. What's not really good is he shoots 32.9% from the field. So not great. On the flip side, Shaq, 29.5 points per game, 10.3 rebounds per game. And both Glenn Rice and Kobe Bryant averaged 18 a game as well. So Houston loses game 1 by just 1. They lose game 2 by a pretty healthy margin. They win game 3 pretty easily. Then they lose game 4 by 10 to end their hopeful season in a whimper. But that's all right. You can just run this thing back, right? Well, no. no. Because shit hits the fan almost immediately. They're eliminated. Pippen says, I'm out. I want to be traded. I'm done with the Rockets. He wants to join his old Bulls coach, Phil Jackson, who has now joined the Lakers. So a proto-Durant over there, saying, hey, I lost to them in the playoffs, but I want to join them because that looks like a lot more fun than whatever we're doing here. And that does not go over well with, one Charles Barkley does not love that. He says, for him to want to leave after 1 year, it disappointed me greatly. The Rockets went out of the way to get Scottie, and the fans have treated him well, so I was just disappointed in him. Pippen, not exactly gracious about this as well. He says, I wouldn't give Charles Barkley an apology at gunpoint. He can never expect an apology from me. If anything, he owes me an apology for coming to play with his fat butt. So there you go. Charles then said, all right, that's what we're going to do. He says, quote, I should have listened to Michael Jordan a year ago when he said, this is Pippen again. One more time. I probably should have listened to Michael Jordan a year ago when he said that Charles will never win a championship because he doesn't show any dedication. He's a very selfish guy. He doesn't show the desire to want to win. That's my reason for wanting to get away from playing with him, because he just doesn't show the dedication. Yikes.
Yikes. Yeah.
So Pippen is traded by the Rockets to the Portland Trailblazers in October of 1999 on exchange for Stacey Augmon, Kelvin Cato, Ed Gray, Carlos Rogers, Brian Shaw, and Walt Williams. Where then he'll join another team that's well, we can't call them. I mean, they were again like one horrific comeback or a comeback from making the NBA Finals, but another pretty disappointing team. But don't belong on this list because they were pretty damn good despite all the disappointment. But yeah, things didn't go great in Portland either, and then Pippen eventually will go back to the Bulls, and then he'll retire. So
yeah, and I would say like regular season, the 99 Rockets, they went from being a 500 team to a team, in the abbreviated season, they won 31 out of 50 games. So like regular season wise, like they were definitely better, but they disappointed. Only they lost to the Lakers in the first round. It definitely didn't meet the hype. So the Matt Ballard and Charles Barkley thing, I dug into that a little bit. So it is true. So Barkley, apparently he made $1 million in the 99 season, but then made $9 million in the 2000 seasons. I don't know if they.
Yeah, I think there was some
how that actually happened. Yeah,
there was. I was trying to figure that out as well. It seems like there was some weird kind of salary cap manipulation thing that they were doing there, where like the contract that we talked about was still worth whatever amount of money, but like for some reason that year he only made $1 million because they wanted to get Pippen in there. It was all done because like they brought in Pippen. They obviously couldn't, like financially it didn't quite work when you're bringing in Scottie Pippen at $50 million or whatever, the 5 year or whatever the hell we said for him, and you're giving Roy Rogers back. Like something's got to give there in that salary cap thing. It was hard to find exactly what it was, but it was some sort of salary cap manipulation or something going on there where Barkley is technically only making $1 million that year, even though his contract is worth a little bit more.
Right, and Matt Ballard made $1.3 million, at least according to Basketball Reference. So it wasn't like technically it was true, but over the life of the contract, Charles was still making more. Right. So it wasn't quite that crazy. But
it wasn't a Jim McElvey or what is it, Sean Kemp situation where it's like quite literally making more than me. It's like, what the hell are we doing here? Get out of here.
Right, exactly. So that's definitely interesting. I wonder if 6 for 1 is a record in NBA trades. There can't be many more, I wonder if there's ever been a 7 guys for one guy a trade in the NBA. I mean, I wouldn't think so, but we'll have to dig into that one, see if that one has ever happened before. Yeah. And it definitely the one guy who I don't think you talked briefly about, but Olajuwon. Olajuwon was he was still pretty good, but no longer an all-star. But Pippen was 33, Barkley was 35, Olajuwon was 36. At some point, these guys are going to fade, and they didn't have a whole lot of depth. They had solid years, as you mentioned, from Dickerson, Mobley, Phil Harrington, but there weren't a lot of guys here who were, really, contributing a whole lot. They had Antoine Walker was 37. They had Eddie Johnson for 3 games, who was 39. They were an old team, and they didn't have a lot of depth, which is, one thing you sacrifice when you bring in Scottie Pippen and trade him for a lot of guys is, they didn't have a whole lot of depth there. And Pippen just wasn't good enough really to to take them over the top. He was pretty good, but definitely, had fallen short of being a superstar.
Yeah. And just, the cantankerous part of everybody just hating each other. The Pippen Barkley thing just did not work from day one. And you do kind of feel bad for Hakeem, who at that time had pretty much mellowed out. Like, Hakeem had his his ups and downs. But at this point, he's won 2 titles. He's just kind of like, he's probably just like, come on, guys, like, let's go. Let's just, what are we doing here? But it ended up not working out very well for Houston. They were able to get back competitive a couple years later, so it wasn't too bad. Obviously with Francis and Mobley, and then bringing in Yao Ming or whatever. So they'd had some lean years, but they've for the most part been pretty solid for a couple decades at this point. Until the most recent where they're not very competitive at all right now. So they're pretty terrible. But
yeah. So next we have, and this is the one that is a bit of a stretch, but hear me out. The 1975 Memphis Sounds. They played in the ABA. So many people, listeners here, may not have heard about the Memphis Sounds or do know very little about the Memphis Sounds. You may recall that the Grizzlies a couple years ago, they busted out the Memphis Sounds uniforms. They're beautiful looking uniforms. So they were basically an expansion team, with a new name. Again, they've been the Tams and the Pros previously. They became the Sounds, much better name, great uniforms, as we mentioned. new ownership, they had Charlie Finley as their owner, and that did not, Charlie Finley is a famous owner of the Oakland Athletics who was known for being extremely cheap and, and not a good steward of a professional sports team. Memphis, it went far worse than it went in Oakland, because at least Oakland won things and Memphis did not. But, Mike Storin, who was the NBA commissioner, or the ABA commissioner, excuse me, and had, led franchises. He led the Pacers, who became a dynasty of the ABA, led the Kentucky Colonels, who were an excellent team as well. Really thought like, hey, Memphis can work here. So they decided, hey, we're going to bring in we're going to revamp the entire team. We're going to bring in 3 of the top 4 players from the Pacers dynasty. They last won the title in 73. They nearly made the 74 finals. Roger Brown, Mel Daniels, and Freddie Lewis. And this is the best comparison I can kind of think of, is basically like, imagine, the Orlando Magic getting Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and Andre Iguodala, from the Warriors.
right.
And that's kind of what we're looking at here.
Yeah, that's a good comp. Yeah, but getting them in another year or two, and it's just like, all right, I mean, it's probably fine. Like, it probably will be pretty good, right?
Helpful,
right.
Right.
All right, like, it's weird, but all right.
Sure. So, and Mel Daniels, he'd been again, the Pacers, they won 3 championships. They've been to a bunch of finals. Mel Daniels had twice been an MVP. Freddie Lewis was one of the better guards in the league, 3-time All-Star. Roger Brown, one of the great forward, 3-time All ABA, 4-time All-Star, but these guys, they were in their 30s, early 30s, but that was, old for a professional athlete at the time, older than it might seem today. And they finished only 27-57, had a negative 4.9 SRS, which was 9th in the league. Brown and Lewis actually only lasted a handful of games before moving on to other teams. Daniels did last the year, although he battled injuries. And all 3 are pretty much near the end of their careers, as we said, although Lewis did play a key role. He ended up on the St. Louis Spirits, and they had a key role in their huge upset of the Nets later on in the 75 playoffs, which we'll get into a little bit here. Because when Daniels, he got hurt after slipping in the bathtub. I think he was recovering from an injury when that happened, so he was hurt for longer. Memphis needed a center. They traded for Tom Owens, who actually ended up probably being the Sounds' best player. Soon after, Brown was traded to the Utah Stars. He ended up back with the Pacers in a much reduced role, though he did help them make the finals that year as an underdog. And then Daniels, he was solid after he came back from the injury, averaged 9.8 points, 9.0 rebounds, 16.1 PBR, but clearly, he'd fallen off from no longer a MVP, no longer really even an all-star. But so bringing those guys in, and I don't think anyone expected them to be, any of them to, be like all-stars still, as great as they were. They clearly all had fallen off a little bit, but I think all 3 of those outcomes were about as bad as you could have expected, having those guys come in.
Yeah. No, it's a weird, like you said, it's a tough one because it is still a team that was pretty good, but the expectations were probably higher than I think it's very safe to say the expectations were way higher than what they got as a result.
Sure. Yeah. And there's a great article on the Memphis Sounds at remembertheaba.com, which I recommend. A lot of good details there. But yes, I mean, Mike Storin, felt like, he could turn around the Memphis franchise, really make it viable. And they were looking toward a merger at this point too, so he thought there was some thought about like, hey, we can, eventually we're going to merge with the NBA probably, let's make Memphis a team that can be part of that merger. Storin found several local investors for the team, including Isaac Hayes and Al Wilson of Stax Records, investors from Holiday Inn, key local businessmen. And then in July of that year, surprised pretty much everybody by resigning as ABA commissioner, stepping in to run the team himself. Kind of an interesting thing to do, but they brought in.
That'd be awesome.
Right.
Imagine in your Orlando Magic scenario.
Adam Silver.
Adam Silver's like, all right, you know what? I got to take over this Orlando Magic franchise and get them back on track. It's like, what? Yeah. What are you doing? Why are you doing this?
I love the Magic so much. I really believe in the Magic. I just really want them to succeed. So So
you're just the stoic Adam Silver, Walton. Hey, right. I am announcing my resignation as commissioner, and I am accepting an offer as the general manager of the Orlando Man. What? Why are you doing this? You don't have to do this. Wouldn't you make more money? Isn't it a lot easier and you're making more money? But I don't know. My man loved the Memphis Sounds, and hopefully Adam Silver one day loves the Orlando Magic enough to.
Right. Yeah. So yeah. And they had a lot, they brought in a lot of ABA veterans, besides the top three, George Carter, Rick Mount, who played pretty well there. The only past player, the Tams player they kept was Larry Finch, who was, basically he was a Memphis State guy, so they kind of wanted a local guy. Other than that, but they had a lot of experience on their team, and they had Joe Mulaney, who was a respected ABA and NBA coach. He brought in, they thought things were going to go well, but unfortunately, the Sounds, they lost 9 of the first 10 games, pretty much killing the buzz in the city for the new team. And despite winning only 27 games, they did make a strong late run. They made the playoffs. They managed to get one win against the eventual champion Kentucky Colonels. Could not pull off the miracle. Really interesting thing, though. They beat the Nets. I'm not sure if it was the final game. It was near the end of the season, which prevented the Nets from winning the division title. The Nets lost a tiebreaker to the Colonels and then ended up having to face the Spirits instead of having to face the Sounds. And then the Nets ended up being upset by the Spirits, who had, of course, Marvin Barnes, who had Fred Lewis, as we talked about. That was one of the bigger upsets in ABA history, but they could have avoided that by beating the Sounds here, and then they would have faced the Sounds in the playoffs, where they more likely would have won. And now maybe they would have lost to the, whoever they faced the next round. But interesting little dynamic there that I thought was kind of cool. Mm-hmm. So more from remembertheaba.com, basically like, the Sounds, and it turned out Memphis wasn't super enthusiastic about the Sounds. Obviously the late start, or the slow start didn't help. They did get attendance up later as they started to play better, but long-term, it just, wasn't going to go well. The team's lease with Mid-South Coliseum, they didn't, wasn't going well. The league started paying some of the bills to keep the team alive.
Mid-South Wrestling definitely outdrawing them for sure. Right?
Oh yeah, right.
Like, no doubt.
Yeah, honestly, maybe they should have just brought Jerry Lawler in. And put
I was
him on
going
the
to
bench,
say,
yeah. I mean, Jerry Lawler, you could probably, get you a few rebounds there.
The Memphis Grizzlies still bring out Lawler every so often. They have those wrestling days, and they're amazing. They sell out, and Lawler puts somebody through a table, and everybody goes nuts. I mean, he's the king of Memphis, man. Like,
that's they should know. Well, anyway, the new ABA commissioner gave the city, a strict deadline of June 1975 to sell 4,000 season tickets and find new investor and get a more favorable lease. And hey, none of that happened. So they ended up being sold. Right. You thought it might happen. Yeah. August 1975, the Sounds were sold to some businessmen in Baltimore. And hey, they had a bizarre thing where the Baltimore investors were like way worse, and the Baltimore Claws ended up never playing a regular season game, and the franchise just completely died. So not a good end for things Memphis, but hey, the things are good in Memphis now basketball wise. So we'll
as of this recording, things are going pretty well. So
right.
By the time you listen to this in 5 years, maybe it won't be.
Maybe they'll, but maybe the Orlando Magic will be good by now.
That's true, with Adam Silver at the helm and Draymond Green and Klay Thompson leading the charge. Yeah, you're Orlando Magic. Orlando
Magic. Right, Orlando Magic dynasty. They'll be like the Magic were bad. What?
Yeah, what? Jonathan Isaac wasn't the best player in the league at a point. Like, what are you talking about?
Exactly.
What a bizarre timeline. I hope that. I don't know if I want that.
We'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Really.
Yeah, who knows?
Anyway,
all right.
Next one here, the 2013 Los Angeles Lakers. Now this is going to be fun, Lakers.
It's going to be super fun.
It was not fun at all, ever.
No, not fun. Yeah.
I was trying to remember if we were doing shows by then. We actually started, I believe, in August of 2014, so we would have been a year after this occurred. So,
almost 8 years.
Yeah, jeez. God.
All right,
but that's a long time, man.
Right.
That's awesome.
I know. Yeah.
But, all right, so they had Dwight Howard and Steve Nash, and this was one of those, like, oh, my God, the Lakers, what the hell? How did they pull this off? How did they do this? How did the Lakers once again get, like, the best big man in the league? They've done this. They did it with Wilt. They did it with Kareem. They did it with Shaq, and now they're doing it again with Dwight Howard. This is not fair. The league is rigged. All of this is awful. This is coming on the heels of, like, the Chris Paul thing where the league was like, no, you can't get Chris Paul. Like, this isn't going to, like, you can't do that. Like, it was such a ridiculous. And then this one, they were like, we can't stop you from getting two great players. So I remember at the time, people were like, wait, you stopped the Paul deal, but not this one. That's the level we were at here. with Dwight Howard and Steve Nash. It seems unbelievable. It seems impossible, but I assure you that it was like, oh my God, the NBA is rigged. The Lakers, just people going nuts about this stuff. The subhead of that Sports Illustrated cover, the Now This Is Going to Be Fun, that showed Steve Nash and Dwight Howard, said, one new king of the West. The New York Times called them one of the most talented lineups in NBA history. They acquired two-time MVP Steve Nash on July 11th for first-round picks in 2013 and 2015, and second-round picks in 2013 and 2014. Nash was slowing down at this point as he was entering his late 30s, but he was still an all-star and still pretty damn good. His final year in Phoenix, he averaged 12.5 points per game, 10.7 assists per game. I put rebounds per game there. I do not believe that Steve Nash got a double-double in points and rebounds. I believe that assists. Then shot a career high 53.2% from the field. He wasn't MVP Nash, but he was still pretty damn good. Here's the ESPN quote here. It says, in an unforeseen twist that could thrust the Los Angeles Lakers straight back into title contention, two-time NBA MVP Steve Nash has successfully negotiated a sign-and-trade deal from the Phoenix Suns to the Lakers that will team him up with Kobe Bryant. And sources also say that Nash is trying to convince longtime teammate Grant Hill, one of his closest friends in the game, to also join him in the Lakers. That does not happen, though. August 10th, it's not just Steve Nash. Now they acquire three-time Defensive Player of the Year Dwight Howard, Earl Clark, and Chris Duhon.
Yeah,
so
Clark and Duhon. You can't forget about that. Yeah.
Yeah, the real X factor in that whole deal is Earl Clark. And this is a massive, insane, stupid trade. It's a 4-team multiplayer trade. It is the Lakers are going to send All-Star center Andrew Bynum to the Philadelphia 76ers, which I assume went well, and I'm not going to look it up. I'll just assume that Bynum on the Sixers was great, so we'll go with that. Who will also receive shooting guard Jason Richardson from the Magic. So the Sixers are getting Bynum and Jason Richardson. The Sixers are going to send Andre Iguodala to the Denver Nuggets. The Magic, your Orlando Magic, are going to receive Aaron Aflalo, Al Harrington, Nikola Vucevic, Mo Harkless, Josh McRoberts, Christian Iyenga, and a first-round pick from either the Nuggets or the New York Knicks in 2014, a protected first-round pick from the Sixers, a protected first-round pick from the Lakers, second-round pick from the Nuggets, and a conditional second-rounder from the Lakers in 2015. So that's a hell of a pickup for, I mean, honestly, Orlando, that was a good pickup. I mean, Nikola Vucevic, who ended up being a pretty good player for them for many years. Aflalo, who did a lot of stuff with their, Mo Harkless did a bunch of stuff. I mean, that's a pretty good haul. It's the Orlando Magic, so of course they made it awful and not fun at all, but that probably should have worked better than it did. But again, it is the Orlando Magic, so of course it didn't. Kobe Bryant via a Facebook post, because he was playing in the London Olympics at the time, and nobody was using Twitter at this time, even if Twitter was around, which much simpler time in our world when Twitter didn't exist, and Facebook was just a little it was fine. It wasn't great, but it was okay. It wasn't just filled with your aunt posting racist stuff all the time, you know. Your aunt didn't know about it. She didn't have it, so
she didn't.
She just said racist stuff at Thanksgiving instead of on Facebook. So, but anyway, says, well, it looks like Superman has found a home. The Lakers have landed a piece that will hopefully carry the franchise long after I'm gone. I've spoken to Dwight Howard, and we are locked and loaded to hopefully bring back the title. Did that conversation actually ever happen? I'm guessing no, right?
I've spoken to I mean,
at no point were Dwight and Kobe locked and loaded, right?
I don't think hopefully the words locked and loaded were not used there. I don't know. Trying to imagine a conversation between
Dwight's just like eating gummy bears or whatever. Like Kobe's like, "Are you ready to get to work?" And and Dwight's like making fart noises and eating gummy bears.
I'm guessing Kobe didn't feel good about that conversation after it was done.
Right.
That's like,
but anyway, Howard was recovering from off-season back surgery. Not great when you're a big man that relies on athleticism and speed and strength and all that sort of stuff, which had some people worried. Also, he's a free agent after the season, and even the ESPN breakdown of the trade mentioned how he was not ready to sign with Los Angeles just yet. Los Angeles, they signed him and basically were ready to say, "Hey, Dwight, here you go. Here's a big-time contract. Let's get this locked up and locked and loaded." And Dwight was like, hold on a minute. So this is from the ESPN article. It says, one source briefed on Howard's plans told ESPN.com's Mark Stein that the All-Star Center will indeed stand firm on his intent to play out the 2013 season without extending his contract so he can become a free agent on July 1st, 2013. Going that route will enable Howard to decide how comfortable he is in Los Angeles before deciding whether to re-sign with the Lakers or join the Dallas Mavericks, who have the requisite salary cap space to sign Howard and who remain one of his preferred destinations from his original list of 3 teams, which is the Nets, Lakers, and the Mavericks. So
not to interrupt, but there was, if I'm recalling correctly, there was Dwight Howard was extremely close to being traded to the Nets. I think there was an issue with Brook Lopez that ended up being reversed, but
yes,
it was like going to happen. Yeah. I just recalled that now. So
yeah, I forget what, I think you're right. It was the Brook. Well,
I'll look it up while you go through.
Yeah, because I remember for a fact that had to, but I think whatever happened was eventually they just decided, you know what, we'll be happier with Brook Lopez instead. But we'll touch on that in a bit because it actually relates to a team we're going to talk about later. But things go bad almost immediately. So head coach Mike Brown decided that the Lakers, he's got this new Lakers team, and he goes, you know what we need to do? We need to run the Princeton offense for some reason. And they did need to run the Princeton offense because they went 0 for 8 in the preseason. It's the preseason. It doesn't really matter. Then they start 1 of 4. And then the Lakers say, all right, Brown, you got to go. This is
right.
You got to hit the bricks here. And they bring in Mike D'Antoni, who, yes, he's related to Nash or whatever, but I mean, a Mike D'Antoni team coaching Kobe and Dwight Howard, is that going to work? And no, not really, because they limped through the first month of the season with their worst start since 1994. The Lakers are in danger of straight up missing the playoffs for the first time since 2005, before finally clinching a spot on the final day of the regular season. There was extra turmoil throughout the year as well. Longtime owner Jerry Buss died in February, and it really took a physical toll for the team. This year, just in general. I mean, a lot of guys had probably their biggest injury issues ever. Kobe Bryant has a great year overall. He scores 27.3 points per game, 5.6 rebounds per game, 6.0 assists per game. Plays in 48 games. However, the last game he played that year, he tore his Achilles. So at age 34, this is a huge injury for Kobe, and really Kobe was never the same after this injury. And Dwight Howard had been an absolute monster for the Orlando Magic over the last few years. And there's a lot of this erasure of like how great Dwight Howard was. Dwight Howard was great for many, many years. You have people that like when they're like, hey, Dwight Howard in the Hall of Fame, they're like, I don't know. No, get out of here. He was really good. Yes, he's been in the pain in the ass for the last decade, but he was really, 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 really good with the Orlando. So show some respect for him. So anyway, something was off though from the day one with the Lakers. He played in 46 games. But is scoring 17.1 points per game, with the lowest since his third year in the league. He averaged an NBA leading, 12.4 rebounds per game, but even that was down from like the 13 to 14 that he was averaging during his peak Orlando year. So he is clearly off. Something's a little wrong there. And Steve Nash, though, unfortunately, the least fun of this entire crew. His body just completely started betraying him this year. And he ends the year, 12.4 points per game, 6.7 assists per game. Not terrible. But it's not Steve Nash, and he plays in only 50 games, and he appeared to be in immense pain pretty much any time he played. This is when he couldn't even sit on the bench. He had to lay down. I mean, it was getting awful. His back was getting shot. His body was just really, really kind of abandoning himself. But anyway, San Antonio Spurs in the first round. The Lakers, beyond battered at this point, without Kobe Bryant, with just Dwight Howard and just Steve Nash, or just the kind of the corpse of Steve Nash, easily swept in 4 games. And they were... They lost game 4, 103-82. Howard, who had a decent playoff run, though, fell apart in the final game. He was ejected with a couple minutes left in the game after receiving his second technical foul. Paul Gasol, who was on the team, we didn't mention him before. He gets a standing ovation when he leaves the game, as everybody kind of assumes that's the end of the run for Paul Gasol in Lakers. And this was the Lakers' first-round exit since 2007, and their first opening round sweep since 1967. They don't get swept very often, especially not in the opening round. So that is it for the Lakers. An absolute disaster. And the Kobe-Dwight relationship does not go very well. So at the beginning of the year, Dwight said of Bryant's tough love approach, so I'll take all the heat that he's going to give me because I know at the end of the day, that's going to make me a better player and a better person, and it's going to make this team better. Did not quite work out that way. Steve Nash would say after the season, everybody could see the relationship between Bryant and Howard was going to be tough from the very start. So despite all this, despite all the turmoil, the Lakers still want to offer Dwight Howard a max contract of 5 years and $118 million. They traded Bynum for him. They traded a bunch of stuff for him. They still wanted to get him. So they give him that deal. It's on the table. It's a max deal. It's the best deal he's going to be able to get. And then on July 13th, 2013, Howard shocks the NBA world by deciding not to sign with the Lakers and instead join James Harden and the Houston Rockets. He says a championship is the priority. That's the priority. Shoot, I'm betting $30 million on it. I just looked at both teams, and I felt like Houston was going in one direction. They got a lot of young players. They got a good coach in Kevin McHale. And I feel like having him as a coach, he could really help me in the post and help me develop like I want to. That was mainly the reason right there. And having the opportunity to grow with the team, a young team like the Rockets, that's the reason why I decided to leave. Now, there's some other fun what-ifs in this Dwight Howard thing. The other teams that were looking at him, Dallas Mavericks, who of course were interested in him for many, many years. The Atlanta Hawks, who would eventually get Dwight Howard many years later, but not the Dwight Howard. They'd get a Dwight Howard. And then one that I always find very fascinating, the Golden State Warriors. The Golden State Warriors wanted Dwight Howard in 2014. Just like, how much of history is different if Dwight Howard's there? You know what I mean? They sign him to like a max deal. He takes up half their payroll, all this sort of stuff. Can you imagine just how much different NBA history is if Dwight Howard waltzes into Golden State and does any of what we would have over the next decade happen? I don't know. It's very.
I don't think so. Yeah. Well, they don't get Iguodala. Now he was really important. Obviously, in the early part of the dynasty. I don't think there's any chance that happens. So it's a completely different.
Absolutely wild. So
the
Lakers. This would be the beginning of the end of the entire obviously Kobe run there. They would miss the playoffs in each of the next six seasons. Jody Meeks would lead the team in win shares the next year. Jody Meeks. That's not good. Yeah. Ed Davis would do so in 2015. Ed Davis. These are the best players on the Lakers during these final few seasons. This is bad. Steve Nash slowly ached his way into retirement. Kobe would go on his retirement tour, obviously capping off his career with the most Kobe performance possible. And Dwight Howard, ironically enough, this is the best part of all of this, would never win a title with Houston, but he would win a title with the Lakers in 2020. So it would take a couple years, but he would return to the Lakers and finally win that title. So
he got there.
So I guess it was fun in the end.
Yeah.
Not really.
Yes, it was fun. Yeah, I apparently there were definitely strong rumors about Dwight Howard trades to the Nets, and even that year with the Lakers. Apparently, around the All-Star time, there was even I never got serious, but there were at least rumors about Dwight Howard maybe getting traded to the Nets for Brook Lopez, something like that. But it never apparently didn't come as close to happening as I had somehow thought it came close to happening. So yeah. Right. But yeah, that was just, that was such a weird one. I mean, that Nash's injury just kind of ruined any chance of them really being great. Unfortunately, he never really came back and, was a particularly effective player again. So that
right. And just there's not two worse personalities you could possibly put together.
Oh yeah. The Dwight
Howard and Kobe Bryant.
Right.
One man is a maniacal maniac about getting better and training and competitiveness, and then the other one's Dwight Howard, who's just making fart noises or whatever.
Right.
You could just imagine the first practice and Kobe probably going to the back being like, "Nah, this isn't gonna work."
No, it was not good. Yes, so. All right, next we have the 1976 Washington Bullets. The year before, 75 Bullets. They'd won 60 games. They made the NBA Finals. Ended up being swept by the Golden State Warriors in one of the bigger upsets in NBA history. Although, every game in that series was extremely close. So it was a kind of a weird, upset, but obviously disappointing playoff result. But yeah, they were a 60-win team. They were really good. Best SRS in the league. They brought back Coach Casey Jones. Their core of Wes Unseld, Elvin Hayes, Phil Chenier. They also had Mike Reardon, Jimmy Jones, good role players, good scorers, and they had budding young talents like Truck Robinson, Nick Witherspoon. So their only big change for the 76 season seemed like a good one. They were getting Washington, D.C. native and six-time All-Star Dave Bing for guard Kevin Porter. So, Bing was 31, little past his scoring prime, but he was still a strong performer. He'd averaged 19 points per game and 7.7 assists per game, having recovered from a detached retina he suffered during the 72 season that hampered his eyesight. He never completely regained it, but he still played effectively even after that point. So he's still been a good player for a number of years.
Yeah, that's still a trade that you make 1,000. I mean, you make a trade every single time. I mean, Kevin Porter ended up having a great career, obviously, but you make a trade every single time to get Dave Bing at that point, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, Porter's a good scorer, good, put a lot of numbers in terms of his assists and steals. He's a good small guard, but was not, nowhere near the star that Dave Bing was. And absolutely that's what you want to do even at age 31. But the Bullets fell from 60 wins to 48 wins. Their biggest change, they upped 4 points from a 91.3 defensive rating to a 95.3. They were still second in the league, but that's a big increase from year to year. So they're giving up, an average of 4 more points per game. They went from the 6th fastest team in the league to 13th. Probably that's a direct result of losing Porter, who's known as a fast player. They also went from 4th in the NBA to 18th in field goal attempts. So they're not nearly getting as many shots up. They did go to the foul line more. They also turned the ball over more and didn't get as many steals, which I think probably has a lot to do with both those things having a lot to do with the lack of field goal attempts. You obviously, if you're turning the ball over more and you're not getting as many turnovers, you're not going to get as many shot attempts up. So, it's not, doing research into this, not really clear if there was like one thing or there really doesn't seem to be like one key thing. I mean, being himself, he played well enough. He was still an all-star that year, won the all-star game MVP, averaged 16 points per game and 6 assists per game. His numbers, were still pretty good. From all accounts, there wasn't any major dissension between him and the other teammates. And every, key player on the team was more or less the same. Mike Reardon slipped a little bit, but he's like your sixth best player. You can kind of absorb that. Truck Robinson had a big role and did well with it. But, one important thing is that, of the key guys in the team, Unseld, Hayes, Bing, Reardon, Jones and Clem Haskins, they're all like 29 or older. So they definitely had a team that was susceptible to just, slipping a little bit. You have multiple guys just, like 90% as good as they were the year before. That's kind of how you go from 60 wins to 48 wins. And yeah, you're still a good team. They were fourth in the league in SRS. It's a little bit more of a balanced league than it had been. So that might've been part of it too. But yeah, it's one of those things like, yeah, you look into it, you kind of shrug and you're like, yeah, I don't really know why they weren't as good. They just definitely weren't.
Yeah, it's one of these weird, and this is a kind of a common theme in a lot of these. Is just like sometimes, we think, hey, they're bringing together all these really, really good players, and this is gonna just work. But eventually, a lot of times, being able to bring together all those really good players is also like all those good players are now starting to get a little bit older. We saw it with the Lakers, with Nash. It's like, yeah, it's Steve Nash, but it's 35-year-old Steve Nash, or
sure. Yeah.
And hell, it's going to be very, very obvious in our next team that we're going to talk about, where it's just like, yeah, sometimes it's the Pippen Rockets is another great one. It's like, yeah, these guys are all legends, but yeah, they're all in their like late. I mean, the reason you can bring together a team of 4 legends or 3 or 4 like consistent all-stars Hall of Famers is because they're getting a little bit older, and that's how you're able to kind of do it, and that's how these guys are have the reputations they have. So yeah, it seems like it should work more than it does work, but yeah, sometimes it's just like the wrong combination of guys, or guys are just a little tired, or guys are just a little old or whatever, and it just kind of, yeah. But this is a weird one too, because it's just like you don't really, it's like, yeah, this should have probably worked pretty well, and it just didn't.
Yeah, and maybe they played a little bit outside of themselves in 75, and then they kind of went back to where they kind of should have been in 76. Even though again the numbers for everybody, no one really slips dramatically. Everyone kind of delivers about the same as they did the year before. But yeah, they're definitely yeah.
To be fair to this team too, I mean they're 2 like insane, miraculous like moments away from being a really like a not a dynasty, but like a team that they're the biggest upset in NBA history, NBA Finals history, and like the miracle at Richfield away from being like a dominant 2-year team or whatever. So
right, yeah, and they lost this was like the first time in 6 years they didn't win the division title. The Cavs won. I think the Cavs were like 1 game better than the Bullets, and then in the playoffs the Cavs win the dramatic series, Dick Snyder's dramatic game-winning shot in 76 to losing Cleveland in the first round, and Casey Jones is casualty of that. He gets fired from the team. I think this was his 3rd year as the coach. And the expectation, there's a New York Times article about it. Expectation is like, yeah, their personnel is regarded as the best in the league. That one quote from Wes Unseld is like, it took time for Bing and his new teammates to gel. Interesting he's like speaking the third person there, almost like he's not one of the new teammates, even though he is.
Which isn't good. I guess that doesn't bode well either.
Right. So yeah, it's not my fault. No, I don't know. But coach can't do much about that. Casey is a man. He treated us like that. Maybe that was the mistake, expecting everyone to act like a professional. As individuals, we just couldn't put everything together as a team. But so after this, they bring in Dick Motta as the coach. Bing, even though he was good in 76 and 77, he definitely fell off and, left for the Celtics to finish his career there at one more season. So he was pretty much done. But, 77, they pretty much have the same record. They do make the second round of the playoffs, but, aren't anything, they'll perform significantly better. In fact, they're worse SRS wise in the regular season. They finished 10th in SRS. So it seems like they're slipping. But, before 78, they end up adding Bob Dandridge, and over those couple years, they do end up, having they get a younger supporting cast, to complement Hayes and Unseld. They get Tom Henderson, Mitch Kupchak, Kevin Greavy gets a bigger role, Larry Wright, Charles Johnson, Greg Ballard, all, kind of key guys in 78 and 79 when they win the title in 78. as kind of a surprise considering they only won 44 games in the regular season. And then, make the finals in 79, losing to the Sonics. So, they end up kind of retooling. Mata ends up being, looks like the right coach for that team, obviously. But, Casey Jones probably got done dirty a little bit through in that situation.
For sure. All right. Let's get to now the 2014 Nets. And by time, we were doing a show in August of 2014. So I think at this point we already knew this was a disaster. But I am going to go on record that even when this deal happened, I was like, I don't think this is going to work. Where were you at with this, the 2013-2014 Nets?
I thought I thought they would be good that year. I'm certainly better than they were. And I thought they were like a championship contender for one team. Like most everybody else, I thought like, oh wow, this is like way too much to give up to get, old Kevin Garnett, old Paul Pierce, and really old Jason Terry. But I still thought like, okay, well this year they should probably be, because those Celtics teams had fought the Heat so tough and they'd come close to beating them. It's like, yeah, you had those key guys, you've got Darren Williams, you got Joe Johnson. Like, yeah, that short term, that makes sense. It's way too much to give up, but short term, I was more optimistic, I guess, than you were at the time.
Yeah, I was just, I don't know. I was just kind of not like, I was just like, those guys are getting kind of old or whatever. But, but you're right. My expectations were probably not, they're not going to waltz into the finals, but like, I still, probably thought that they'd be competitive. A decent shot at it, and that did not quite happen. So the 2014 Nets, they had Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, and Jason Terry. It's the second year of the Nets in Brooklyn, and they are ready to kick this rebrand into overdrive. And the first year in Brooklyn went relatively well. The Nets finished with a 49-33 record. That was their first winning season since 2006. And I saw this little nugget too, which blew my mind, but is absolutely true. Excluding their ABA years, this was the second best year, tied for the second best year in franchise history, and the first time that the Nets ever in their NBA history, not ABA, NBA history, had a winning record on the road. And I was like, that's impossible. They went to back-to-back NBA finals. So they won 52 games in the first Jason Kidd year, when obviously he was a player, not a coach, and then 49 the second. So that the second year tied, this year, or the first year in Brooklyn as their best record ever, which is unbelievable considering how long they'd been around. But even more unbelievably, they didn't have a winning record on the road in either of those years. The 52 win year, they were 19-22 on the road. And then in 2003, when they won 49 games, they were 16-25 on the road.
That's so weird.
The home field advantage of the Metal Hands Arena.
Right. It's not like they're in Denver. Like Denver, you get that.
Right. There's nothing. Yeah. It's a horrible arena built on a swamp. Like there is.
It's not. Yeah. It's not like travel's like a huge thing. For
the airport's right next to the arena.
Right.
It couldn't be any easier there. I guess the allure of New York City was so much that I don't know, but you're not in it, the Knicks didn't have this. The Knicks weren't like, you know what I mean? Like man, it's so wild. Yeah, I was like, that's not true. That's these people are forgetting what they're lying. They're right. Wow. All right,
crazy.
But anyway, back to 2014. Former Nets star, the aforementioned Jason Kidd, was hired as head coach. And then on July 12th, 2013, the Nets made the biggest trade in their franchise's history, acquiring Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, and Jason Terry from the Boston Celtics. Nets general manager Billy King says, honestly, did I think we could pull off something like this? No. But Celtics GM Danny Ainge and I just kept working at it and got to the point where we were both comfortable. Can you imagine that? Danny Ainge making a deal, actually getting to the table and making a deal instead of just saying he was going to make a deal and then darn it, he just couldn't make it. So
he got a lot of draft picks, so yeah.
But he got this one done. So
yeah, he did. Yeah. All right.
Mikhail Prokhorov. Remember Mikhail Prokhorov?
Oh, I do. Yes.
He says, today the basketball gods smiled on the Nets. With the arrival of Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce, we have achieved a great balance on our roster between veteran stars and young talents. This team will be dazzling to watch and tough to compete against. Of course, this wasn't peak Garnett and Pierce. Garnett at this time was 37. Pierce was 35. But Billy King says here, I hope people keep questioning KG and Paul Pierce's age because I know the type of warriors they are. The workload will not be as much as it's been in the past because of their teammates, but I enjoy the fact that people keep questioning Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce. I know that they'll come out and prove them wrong, so I'm not concerned about that at all. Should have been concerned a little bit. But fun fact, there was an initial trade here that Garnett vetoed because the first deal did not include Jason Terry, and he basically was like, "Nah, man, I don't want Terry on that rebuilding team. I want him to come along with us." So he insisted that Terry go along with them, and he got it done. So I don't know what they had to add to get Jason Terry in there, but who knows? So in the end, the Celtics return package here, which they would receive Gerald Wallace, Marshawn Brooks, and Chris Humphries. They would also get Keith Bogans, Chris Joseph, and first-round draft picks in 2014, 2016, and 2018, as well as the rights to swap first-round picks with the Nets in 2017. So when it all finished, here is the entire haul. Just think of this. This haul is insane, and it could have even been that much more insane as well. They got Keith Bogans, arguably the biggest.
Sure, yeah, you got Bogans. Yeah,
right. I mean, that changed the whole dynamic of the entire team.
Sure, yeah,
Marshawn Brooks, not as much as Keith Bogans, but solid nonetheless.
Yeah.
Chris Humphries, Chris Joseph, Gerald Wallace, a 2014 first-round pick. That was just James Young. Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah.
2016, Jaylen Brown, who obviously still an important piece of the Boston Celtics. A 2017 first-round draft pick, which they selected Markelle Fultz, but obviously then flipped Markelle Fultz to the Sixers for Jason Tatum. So they got Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum in this.
Yeah.
A 2018 first-round pick, they got Colin Sexton, or Colin Sexton was later selected. This was moved in the Kyrie Irving trade. So an interesting fact there, wrinkle that, if they never make that Kyrie Irving trade, they have, someone like that. I mean, Colin Sexton's not that great, but hell, if Kyrie stays, like that's an even big, whatever. Sure. And then they got the 2017 number one overall pick from Brooklyn as a result of that pick swap to get to the Markelle Fultz thing. So, so essentially, even with like the Kyrie thing being worth nothing at that point, the 2018 pick, and even with James Young in 2014, and none of those players really mattering. Yeah. In one deal, they got Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, who are key building blocks of their entire team. Sure. And it could have been even more ridiculous if the Kyrie trade had worked out and not been complete disaster.
Sure.
Nuts. It was absolutely nuts. So.
Absolutely, yeah. No.
But it was all worth it for the Nets because they go into the season with the highest payroll in the NBA and the expectations that Pierce, Garnett, and Terry are going to join the solid core of Brook Lopez, Darren Williams, and Joe Johnson. And people, don't forget, at this time in 2014, there was legit conversations about Darren Williams and Chris Paul, and you were not nuts if you thought that Darren Williams was better than Chris Paul.
Well, I think in 2014 maybe, but like 2011.
Yeah. But 2014, you're kind of being stupid with that. Right. It's probably Chris Paul, but I guess you could kind of, but now like a decade later, it just seems absolutely absurd to people that like you have to say no. There was legit a time where people were like, yeah, Chris Paul's good, but I don't know. I think Darren Williams.
I was good, Darren Williams. Yeah.
That was a decade ago, and Chris Paul's still really, really good, and Darren Williams has been retired for a decade now.
Yeah,
It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. So things went south fast for this team. They were 5-12 after the first month of the season, 24-27 by the All-Star break. They finally limp into the playoffs at 44-38. Things weren't bad, they just weren't that good. Bad defensive rating, bad net rating, one of the worst paces in the league. And what's weird, too, even attendance at the Barclays Center wasn't exactly gangbusters. They had this idea that, oh, man, this is going to put Brooklyn on the map, and it just really didn't. They finished 17th out of 30 in attendance. Brook Lopez started the year great, but fractured his foot in December, and he would miss the rest of the season. Darren Williams, his numbers fell a lot from the prior year as he scored just 14.3 points per game, the lowest since his rookie year. Like we're saying now, this is where you're starting to be like, I don't know. What do we got here with this Darren Williams guy? This would really be the beginning of the end for him as well. Your man, ISO Joe Johnson, was solid as usual, made the All-Star game again after a one-year absence. Cool. His scoring did drop slightly, but he played in 49 games, was solid, kind of calming factor around the whole turmoil as he's just Joe Johnson. He's just kind of hard hat, lunch pail, goes to work, does his thing,
Yeah.
And this is when we should also mention as well that this was that random year when they signed Andre Kirilenko for like league minimum, and everyone's like, so you're telling me that there's a Russian owner signed Andre Kirilenko who played in Russian national leagues for a league minimum. Nobody wanted to pay him anymore, and everybody was kind of like, that's kind of weird. But it didn't matter because he fell off a cliff. He scored only 5 points per game, and he'd be out of the league after just 7 games the next season. But that was a thing. Like, there was people really kind of curious how the hell they got Andre Kirilenko there, but it didn't matter because it ended up not working out very well at all. And then what about the Boston guys? Paul Pierce, his scoring fell from 18.6 points per game in Boston the prior year to 13.5 with Brooklyn. He was fine, but he was 36 and starting to slow down. Kevin Garnett, oh man, did things fall apart for Kevin Garnett. He was 37, but he was coming off an all-star season still. Nobody could have expected his scoring to fall from 14.8 points per game to 6.5. 6.5 points per game. He did still grab 6.6 rebounds per game, but this is Kevin Garnett. His shooting also fell to 44%. So yeah, he probably the biggest guy that just was like, oh yeah, no, I'm not that good anymore. Sorry. tried. He yelled a lot still, but it was it was done. Yeah, the bloom was off the rose, unfortunately. So that him more than almost anybody was just like, oh boy, I don't know if this is going to work. Yeah. And Jason Terry didn't even last the season. This is the best part about this whole thing is they're like, nah, man, no, we can't let Jason Terry, like, he's got to be with us. The deal can't happen unless Jason Terry's with us. Like, you know, he can't be on a rebuilding bad team or whatever. We're not going to let it happen. They traded him to the Sacramento Kings for Marcus Thornton. Jason Terry goes, I'm not playing in Sacramento. He never does play in Sacramento. He eventually would sign with Houston later, and then he would have a couple years with Milwaukee and stuff. But this is pretty much the end of Jason Terry.
He hung around for a while.
He did hang around for like 4 or 5 more years. But this was the end of him being like starter, 6-man Jason the Jet, and then he just became like cagey veteran Jason Terry after this, which is fine. Right. But
sure.
What's weird, though, is I try to dig for it. There's just not a whole lot of drama involved with this team. Everybody kind of knew the score. And we're just like, we're just kind of bad, not that good. Kevin Garnett during the season said when we lose, it's like this. It's a complete lack of focus. There's no way we should be losing by 40 to NBA team with the guys we got. I've got to say it's a complete lack of focus. That's all I have to say. We just didn't show up. They weren't that good. They would make the playoffs and they'd win a first-round series against Toronto, but then they'd get pretty handed by the defending champion Miami Heat in the second round. And then it just kind of all falls apart. Pierce is like, I'm not going to stick around. I'm going to go join the Wizards. So he joins the Wizards. Garnett stays for the next year, but he's traded in February back to Minnesota. Jason Terry, as we mentioned, is gone. So basically, everybody's gone. Like 2 years in, like everybody is gone. The Nets finished 38-44. They were able to squeak into the playoffs as an 8 seed, and then that would be their last playoff appearance until 2019. And then it just kind of ended. So it was a big to-do. They trade a bunch of shit. They trade a bunch of guys. They trade a bunch of draft picks. They basically set the Boston Celtics up for another decade. And then like a year later, it was just kind of all gone. And there's not a whole lot of like, he said, she said, oh, this is why. It was just like, we were kind of old and we were just kind of bad. So I don't know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest drama involved Jason Kidd because like at the beginning of the year, or near the early part of the season when they got off to that bad start, he demoted, like Lawrence Frank, like his former coach, like who he brought in as an assistant. Like there was that weirdness about I'm gonna blame it on Lawrence Frank. And then after the season, he ends up, going to the Bucks. Like he ends up leaving the team entirely and going to the Bucks. And then, Lionel Hollins is their coach the next season. But like in the season there, it was more, I mean, in retrospect, I kind of forgot how much. I mean, it was really Darren Williams and Garnett. Those are the two guys who really just kind of like fell off entirely. And Garnett's I don't think is quite as particularly. And he only played 54 games that year too. I forget if there's a specific injury that he had or if he just was banged up here and there.
Yeah, I think it was just little nagging stuff. And this is when it just kind of overnight was just like, oh yeah, I'm old. I've been playing in the league for 15 years, playing really hard, long playoff runs. Like it all just kind of came to a head here. He's 37. Right. Like that's pretty normal.
Right. Yeah. You would expect him to be a little better, I guess. But obviously the injuries and just and a little bit of reduced role and everything. Yeah. I mean, I think him and Darren Williams were like kind of the key ones that kind of fell off there. Yeah, and the Celtics actually had 1 year later had a better regular season and deeper playoff run than the Nets did in the 2015 season. So like the Celtics weren't even bad for that long. So kind of funny how that ended up working out. All right, we got one more. Actually, 2 straight years of the New York Knicks, 1976, 1977. Again, I don't know if either of these teams they were a realistic title threat, but they were definitely big stars, expected to shake things up, expected to make the team better. Interesting transition between eras and definitely worth talking about. So 76 Knicks, they added Spencer Haywood. And Spencer Haywood at that point had been awesome. Like he was only 26. He'd been an ABA MVP. He was 5 times all league and 3 times in the first team. He'd averaged 26 points per game, 13.6 rebounds with a 21.9 PER. Absolutely star. There's some red flags. His relationship had deteriorated with Coach Bill Russell and the Sonics. He wasn't definitely. He was more of a offensive minded guy. Although he'd actually played fairly well. Some defense with Seattle. Seattle had never been like, particularly good team. They made the playoffs a little bit, but they were kind of middling. So, there was some reasons to think like, oh, maybe he's not quite as great as he was. But, and the Knicks, they were 40-42 the prior year. They'd lost Willis Reed. They'd lost Jerry Lucas. They'd lost Dave DeBusschere, after the 74 season. So, but they still had Walt Frazier. They still had Urban Rowe. They still had Bill Bradley from the title year. So, you definitely think that, yeah, maybe, this is going to turn them around, at least make them like a strong playoff team. But, after the trade, which happens in October 75, Red Holzman, Knicks coach, says, hey, Spencer has to be considered a superstar of the game. The fact that he has been around so long and is still so young and has accomplished so much is a hell of a positive note. It'll make us a lot stronger. We're getting a hell of a runner, shooter, and rebounder. So, interesting how he arrived. There's a great New York Daily News article that kind of recaps some of it. And the Knicks there also had been talk that they were going to try to get Will Chamberlain at the time. That kind of fell through. So, when it happens with Haywood, Walt Frazier says, yeah, it's even better than acquiring Will Chamberlain. That's how good this is. And then Haywood, when asked in his introductory press conference about fans considering a savior, Haywood responded, "Then I'll save." Yeah, there you go. Apparently it made, it ticked off his teammates a little bit. Phil Jackson, of course, who's, Phil Jackson is, sourpuss Phil Jackson. He's confronted Haywood, even though, Phil Jackson, yeah, we really missed your
Zen
5
master,
points.
No, man. He's Zen. It's all about, inner peace and all that sort of stuff.
How dare you disrespect, Phil Jackson and his 6 points per game and 4 rebounds per game, he's like, yeah, it's like Phil even confronted Haywood about asking how 2-time champions can be saved by a player with 0 titles. Yeah, I guess half these guys were 2-time champions. So there you go.
But yeah, not because of you though. I mean, you were a part of it.
Yeah, you were right. But yeah,
chill out, man. Yeah,
yeah. So Haywood's quote later on, he's like, "Yeah, I was coming in as a savior, and that was the first bad turn because the Knicks had 2 championships, and I was coming in as a savior, and I'm replacing Jerry Lucas, Willis Reed, and David Busher, and I'm one person. So that was a bit unfair." But I thought I could do it all. He's like, I'm like, hey, I'm coming here to do this. So that rubbed people the wrong way. The team, if you won 2 championships and I'm talking a bit how I'm saving, that was a bad turn, So, he understood later that it upset people. But, and this was also after like the offseason could have been even bigger because before they got Haywood, they reached an agreement with George McGinnis, who had been the ABA MVP, on a 6-year contract. But it was rejected by the NBA because the Sixers had held his rights after choosing him in the draft. They were even stripped of their first-round pick in the 76 draft, which is the first time a team had been stripped of its pick there. So, and I don't know if they would have gotten Haywood had they gotten McGinnis, but still, obviously McGinnis was an even better player at that point than Haywood, although would also have an early decline, although not as dramatically as Haywood's was. Yeah, but season just, it started very poorly. They ended up starting 10-20. They did go on a 6-game winning streak. And then later on in January, they had another 6-game winning streak. So they were 24-23 at one point, but that was the only point in which they had a winning percentage over 500. It was the first time since the 66 season, the team did not reach the playoffs. And, one thing that Haywood did say is that, he very much got into the New York partying scene with his new wife, who was the supermodel Iman, recreationally used cocaine and went out there. It sounds like it was the kind of thing where it was more like he liked to go out and have fun, but it wasn't really like addiction level problem until
right.
like
it was the 70s in New York. I mean, let's be honest. He was not alone in enjoying himself and enjoying a little bit of
that
candy,
affected that affected a lot of guys. Yeah, but then obviously things got really bad for the Lakers. And he's he's putting out a hit on his coach. Things got deep there, but
things did get a little worse. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, it became a full blown issue. And you mentioned supermodel Iman. She was married to David Bowie after Spencer Haywood, right? That's incredible. Like, can imagine like it's Spencer Haywood and David Bowie. Like what a combination of people to be married to. That's incredible. Yeah. Like, have they ever had imagine a Spencer Haywood David Bowie conversation? Like, what does that go like?
I don't know. That's a good question.
They've met at some point, right? They had to,
I'm sure.
Met, like, oh, hey, you're married to
I don't know. I don't know if they had kids or anything. If that would have been involved, but that would have been interesting. Yeah. 3.5 years with the Knicks. Haywood averaged 17.1 points per game, 8.6 rebounds, 16.3 PR. So he was productive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like terrible, but like, his first season in 76 definitely his strongest before he kind of dealt with injuries and other issues. Including a fit with the big star they bring in 1977, which is Bob McAdoo, who was the 1975 MVP. They also bring in Jim McMillan, who had been like part of the Lakers 69 win team, still was really good with those Braves teams. So like they give up John Gianelli and $3 million. That's like a huge trade.
Yeah.
It seems like, hey man, that's going to be awesome. But
this is going to be fun. The New York Times.
Yeah. They go from 38 wins to 40 wins. And McAdoo, he starts the All-Star game, Monroe's an All-Star again, but yeah, they end up finishing with a 0.01 SRS. The 13th in the league. They're not really good on offense or defense. They're just, they're a very average team, unfortunately. And, McAdoo, like, certainly the Knicks are not as good as is expected during this time. And, we've talked a lot about McAdoo in the past and how he kind of has like a weird decline in the late 70s. But with the Knicks, he averaged 26.7 points, 12 rebounds, 3.3 assists, 1.4 blocks, and 1.3 steals in 171 games. So production-wise, he was still really strong. We did
a show about that not that long ago, about how because people kind of consider McAdoo in New York like a huge disappointment. It's like, no, the dude was great.
He fell off after that a lot,
right.
Obviously, but at that point, production. Now again, like, does he play defense? Does he fit well with his teammates?
Those are
that stuff isn't happening. One illustration of that is this year, this 77 Knicks, and they still got Walt Frazier, though Walt Frazier's obviously long in the tooth. He's by the 77 season, he's 31. Monroe's 32. I'm thinking Garnett, Kevin Garnett. No, Bill Bradley. I'm thinking Bill Bennett. Bill Bradley. Yes, Bill Bradley retired in 76. So that was his last season. He doesn't play in 77, but they're a little better, but they still win only 40 games. They do make the playoffs. They lose in they do not make the playoffs in 77. They would make it in 78. They give up 68 points to Pete Maravich. Pete Maravich just destroys, everyone they put in front of him, including Walt Frazier, who, had hounded Maravich early on in his career. So Maravich got a little bit of individual justice there. And then, 78 season, they bring in Willis Reed as the coach. They try to get out to inspire the big men. There's a Sports Illustrated article from December of 77, but they basically say, like, hey, they have describes Haywood McAdoo as two players who through all their pro lives have had to do little more than shoot and block shots. So not a whole lot of respect for what they were doing. And it describes how Haywood is like, he's actually like, he understands like, okay, McAdoo's here. He kind of plays my spot. Neither one is, McAdoo's tall enough to be a center, but really isn't like, the type of player who's going to be a center in the late 70s NBA. And Haywood's, more better forward. So he understands that, like, okay, McAdoo's going to be the scorer here, so I have to try and be a guy who's going to play defense and rebound. And he even has like this list of like 17 rules over his locker at the Madison Square Garden, just, beginning like, I'm going to box out, I'm going to rebound, I'm going to play pressure defense. And then it ends with concentrate. Like, you can tell, like, at some level he wants to do it, but just like doesn't have the discipline or like the mentality, or just isn't able to like shift his game to the level where he's going to be able to do those little things and be different than, he's been for like the rest of his entire career.
Yeah, it's a tough. Yeah, on paper this seems like a team that should have worked, but it doesn't unfortunately.
Well, it should work better than it did. I mean, are they ever going to be like championship level?
Right. No, disappointment in the sense that maybe you thought it was going to be a little bit more fun, a little bit more exciting than it was, and kind of usher in that the new era of New York Knicks basketball, and it really did not. And And I'm sorry, Bradley did play in the 77 season, but he was in a much reduced role, playing 15 minutes per game at that point. So, Phil Jackson, was older at that point. I mean, everybody was older, but, Frazier he definitely slipped, and they obviously traded him to Cleveland. Monroe, still pretty good, but, they didn't have
There was another case where, like, their guys kind of got older, their key guys, and they didn't have a lot of good players to replace. I mean, Lonnie Shelton ended up, he was a good young player. Jim McMillan fell off quite a bit after that trade. I think they would have expected more out of him. So there's a lot of good reasons why they, it was a number of guys. It wasn't necessarily just one guy, but obviously McAdoo and Haywood, kind of the poster child of the idea of the team at the time of, like, trying to buy a star and getting them to, be better, and the idea of how important team play is during that time. And kind of, I think they were, we have this, like, obviously we're in an era, we've been in the era for, like, kind of the last 10 years or so of, super team era of putting star players together and, kind of making a go of it. And sometimes, putting that ahead of chemistry, sometimes it works really well. Sometimes, like with the examples this year with the Lakers and the Nets, it hasn't worked as well. But I think, McAdoo and Haywood are kind of a cautionary tale. We're a cautionary tale of, like, not doing that for a long time, of, like, it's obviously there's more to a team than putting stars together. But after the Haywood trade, which happens in January of 79, they basically, there's an illustration of, like, in the first half, McAdoo, who's matched against smaller forward, takes 9 shots and made 6. In the second half, McAdoo only took 2 shots, while Haywood took 10 shots and made 4. And then after, like, there's an anecdote about McAdoo, like, deciding, he was in a workout, but he said he developed stomach pains and didn't want to do the workout. And then said he was upset about not being given the ball in the second half of the game, said he was mismatched against Bingo Smith and Mike Mitchell. And he says, and he talking about his team, those guys are making numerous problems for themselves by not giving up the ball. It was so easy for them to see that I was involved in mismatches. So
again, like the Dave Bing thing, when you're saying those guys and then you're referring to your teammates, not good.
Right. Exactly. Right. Yeah. Those guys are like, it's not my fault. They're not giving me the ball. If they would just give me the ball, everything would be great. So yes. So, and then McAdoo, of course, would be traded, I think in the offseason after that. So exactly. So
Fun. So and obviously we were going to talk about the 2022 Nets, but I mean we've gone long. You're living it right now. You saw it in real time. They Kyrie and Kevin Durant come together in an offseason and they say, hey, we're going to build this thing here. They acquire James Harden and they say, oh man, now we go. And then
Kyrie decides, like, I'm not going to get vaccinated. I'm not going to get vaccinated. I'm not going to play. Yeah. So
James Harden still struggling after deciding to get fat to try to get traded, and then said, all right, well, now I'll just lose all my fat. And then they went, oh, wait a minute, I'm 33 now. That doesn't work the same as it did when I was 27. So let me tell you, it sucks. Yeah, getting fat it takes a lot of time to not get fat anymore.
It does. It's hard. So, it's tough.
It is quite the struggle. So you're living it. You see it right now. But maybe in episode 500 we'll cover the 2022 Nets when it's now.
Oh yeah, I'm sure
a distant thing that nobody remembers.
Sure.
But
that'd be a great reason. Yeah, when we're talking about that Orlando Magic dynasty, we'll also talk about. Hey, remember when that's for good? Yeah. Hey. Yeah. Exactly. So
there you go. So that is that. That was fun. I like that. That was a good little show we did.
I enjoyed that one for sure. Yeah. Hopefully the listeners enjoyed it as well. Yeah, but we went a little long, but it's been a while since we've been here, so you get more of us this time. So it's all good. But everyone, of course, you can check us out over on backnba.com. If you want to find us on social media, we are at Facebook and Twitter at Over and Back NBA. You can find us there. Give us comments. See if there's any other teams that you think like, oh, hey, why did you talk about these guys? Don't mention the 2004 Lakers. We've already addressed that, so don't bother with that. But any other team you think like, oh, yeah, this team brought this guy, or I don't know. Well, you're totally wrong about the Memphis Sounds, Jason. How dare you speak, ill of Joel Mulaney or exactly, or Mike Storin. So anyway, if you got any opinions like that, feel free to share them with us. If you want to find us on any podcast platform, want to give us a rating and review, a good one, we would prefer that. We appreciate that. Otherwise, just keep on listening. We're back again soon.